Okay, hi everyone. My name is Graham Smith, public in the UK, joined by Ollie Nyquist from Sweden and Floris Muller from the Netherlands. It's the third in a series of 4 discussions about European monarchies, how they compare, what the issues are, and so on. Tonight we're talking about the Bicycling Monarchy. And this is a phrase which is used quite a lot in the UK, usually referring to the Dutch monarchy. I think some Dutch royals used a bike a long time ago, and everyone got excited by that and thought, well, maybe we could scale down our monarchy and they could be like that, sort of ordinary people just going about their ordinary business, but also happen to be royals. And I think there's a lot of mythology around that. We'll get into that. I'm sure Floris can set the record straight on that. But the question really is, well, there's 2 questions we want to look at tonight, which is, as campaigns against the monarchy, is there a benefit to gradual reform that takes away a lot of the worst aspects of our monarchies, or is that a trap where we end up, which is, I think, perhaps a little bit like Sweden, where a lot of the worst things have been taken away, and so the pressure for reform is less? And what I get asked a lot is, would I accept a bicycling monarchy instead of a republic? Would we, if we took away all the problems of the monarchy, then would that be enough? Could we compromise? So we'll address that as well. On that second part, my answer is always no, because the monarchy is still there, and we'll come on to that in a second. But Floris, I mean, this bicycling monarchy thing that the Brits seem to think you enjoy, I mean, what's your take on that? Does it reflect the reality? Is it much different to the pomp and circumstances of the British monarchy?
Well, basically what I think is that the bicycle monarchy is mostly a PR stunt. It's showing off that the royals in the Netherlands are just like anybody else, are ordinary people, but in reality they are not. They have special rules for them. They have more power than any other individual in the country. They don't pay taxes, and they are monarchs. They are not chosen. You can portray yourself as just an ordinary human being, but that doesn't really change reality. But I know that over the last couple of years, and especially under this king, we've done everything to portray them as such. Our king enjoys house music as anybody else, not just the classical high arts. Their children go to their schools on their bike. Look at them, look how very nice they are. But in reality, obviously, that's not. Reality is that they have some really great benefits. So the bicycle monarchy is exactly as it sounds. It's a fairy tale. It's not real.
Exactly. And if I may sort of go on that, because this, for us as well, is one of the most fundamental questions, right? We've stripped away a lot of the powers of the monarchy, mostly all, and we have the ceremonial role. So we get faced with a question of whether or not it's functioning now. But as we've seen in earlier episodes, this is half true, since they still have a lot of benefits tied to them, of course, as Floris said, and a lot of soft power. So, of course, we're not happy, obviously, since we still have this organization, to have a monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question for us, I mean, we've probably got one of the worst monarchies in terms of so many things. All the things that are bad about monarchies are bad about our monarchy. So there's a lot of things that could be done along the way which could make it better, as it were. But I guess a monarchy is never really better because it's still a monarchy. The fundamental point of principle is still there in terms of hereditary monarchy, the fundamental issues that brings up in terms of lack of accountability. So I think it's a bit of wishful thinking to think that we could somehow make monarchy palatable. It's still a monarchy, and that's a very serious problem. I had a slightly bad connection, so I didn't catch everything that you guys said there. But I mean, do you ever get this question of compromise thrown at you? Is it suggested, oh, well, we just made it cheaper, or we made it free, or whatever? Does that come up as an issue?
Well, if I can react to that, shall I first, Ole?
Yeah,
if I can react to that, ever since the mid-19th century in the Netherlands, we've been working on this so-called constitutional monarchy, meaning that in theory the king has no power, has no political power. In reality, that is a little bit different. So we've really been working on controlling the government, the monarchy. But again, it's still a monarchy. So that's the case for the Netherlands. Can you hear me, by the way? As I have
yes.
seem to have some.
Yeah, absolutely. So apologies to everyone that's listening and watching.
I mean, it's the most common thing we get thrown in our face. Like, this has such a low importance in public life now. So what's the point of even doing away with it? But which, of course, is a little awkward because, well, it's still a fundamentally undemocratic institution. Whether or not they take their bikes to school is very much not an issue. So for us, it's one of those things that I think we'll get into that later, but we have to sort of prioritize, like, what are our arguments here? Well, we still have a monarchy that's fundamental, right? But we also have to show that it's still not just this bicycle monarchy, because if it was this bicycle monarchy in essence, then a lot of people would just not care, basically. So we have to make them care.
Yeah. As we talk, we see that Graham is reloading. Obviously, the connection is not that good, so I'll probably take over a little bit. Last time we spoke in this chat, Ola, I said that in the Netherlands we see, and I'm very interested if you have the same in Sweden, and if you see a connection between a bicycle monarchy and this phenomenon. Over the last couple of years, whenever you would debate monarchy, people would switch to people personally. So we would talk about the personality of the king, and look at him. He's just a victim of the institution he stands for, and he wants to be normal. Do you see that connection as well? Because I really see that in the Netherlands, that we connect this image of him being very normal to the fact that to be able to support the monarchy and to defend the monarchy, mostly, we make it very personal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in essence, since we've done away with most of the formal roles of the king has become more of this character, basically, where you're divided on whether or not you think he's sort of this funny, goofy type, or you think he's kind of nuts or whatever. But it's definitely about this personality cult. Which is one of the things that we're actually, as an organization, sort of afraid that when his daughter takes over, she's much more popular within like the Swedish public. So we think that we would have a harder time to argue against the monarchy if she takes over. But yeah, it definitely becomes this question of whether or not you like the person, and not whether or not you think the institution in and of itself is right or wrong.
Yeah. Again, and there's Graham again. Graham, I took over asking the questions a bit. Hope you'll stick in this time. As I again see that your image freezes a bit. Connection with the UK doesn't seem to be that well.
Yeah, I think my Wi-Fi doesn't. It's not used to the heat, so I think it's struggling a bit.
It's warm in England for the very first time in years. Shall we?
Oh, everything's freezing for me, so apologies to everyone watching.
We don't.
I mean, what sort of reforms would there be?
I think I will take over from Graham again, as the connection is not that good. I'll continue the debate until we have a stronger connection. I think that what Graham is trying to talk about is what kind of reforms are needed, well, is it arguably, is it something that a Republican would go for, reforming a monarchy and getting the monarchy light? Do we accept that, or are we for abolishing the monarchy as a whole? And we referred to that a bit at the start of this debate.
Yeah. And I would say, like, the very essence of being a Republican is wanting a Republican system. So a monarchy light would not suffice. That being said, I think a lot of people who might not identify as Republican, but might not like the idea of a very powerful monarchy, would probably be okay with this light version of the institution and this sort of bicycle monarchy. But I feel it would be weird to still accept the institution as a Republican when your whole point is that it is at a fundamental level an undemocratic institution. At least for me, I'd love to hear a Republican make the argument that a monarchy light is a good way to go, but I have yet to hear one. I don't know. How about you, Forrest?
Well, the most interesting thing is, and I would like to refer to that as well, today we've had a survey in the Netherlands, and it turned out that 52% of everybody here in the country was in favor of getting rid of all the political power for our king and of the royal family. So obviously, I think over the years, as the monarchy and all the institutions connect to it, really look out how to preserve in the end. So maybe giving a little in, getting a little bit back in times. I think they will respond to this, and they will respond of artificially building an image that they do not have any influence, that they do not have any political power. But in the end, I truly agree with you, Ola, that for a Republican, it's not as obviously a monarch with a lot of power is easy to attack, because you can say, we don't like this, we don't like that, and making the whole subject smaller, decreasing political power, decreasing the amount of money you give to them every year, makes it much harder. As people again will say, as you just mentioned, what is this about? The world is full of problems. Is this the thing we are going to focus on? So I think things will happen, but for a Republican and for the Dutch Republican Society, I would say whether we have a monarchy light or we have a full monarchy like in Great Britain, we don't like it either way. As a monarchy is not democratic, and it's not what we go for.
No, exactly. And what it is an interesting sort of inherent problem in that we can, from a constitutionally, hey, welcome back, Graham. You're a lot better now.
Hopefully this will work.
Yeah, it sounds and looks a lot better already. We were just discussing the sort of the shrinkage of power and the problems you face as a Republican.
Yep.
And I was just saying that while you have a harder time arguing for it, it also becomes easier to constitutionally get rid of it. It's like this sort of game where you have to balance it, because if you shrink it, then yeah, you're going to have a harder time arguing for it, but it's also harder to get rid of it just altogether from point. I think UK would struggle to reform its model overnight, basically.
Yeah, I think with us, certainly when people say, let's make it cheaper, let's scale it down, bicycling monarchy, the big obstacle to that is that the royal family don't want to do that. They like all the pomp and ceremony. They want to be surrounded by sycophants and bodyguards and, flying around the country in the helicopter. So that's a problem. The one reform that I would really like to see, though, is change to the Freedom of Information Act so that we can access all of their documentation, both from the archives and current, in the same way that you can with government information. Because I think they would then be deluged by requests from us and from the press. And I think that there's a lot of stuff there that they don't want out in the public eye. So there is a kind of a strategic value to doing that. But I suppose I think there's an important point that you made there, Ollie, is that I guess if it's really bad and it's not changed, and it's the old thing that if something is inflexible, it will break and it will bring it all down. But if it has changed to the point where it doesn't really do anything, then I guess that people might then say, well, it's much easier to make that smaller step from this completely innocuous hereditary head of state to an elected one. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult one, but I suppose what's going to cause those smaller reforms? I mean, what was it? Was it in the 1970s, Ollie, when the monarchy was reformed in Sweden? I mean, where did that come from? Why did that happen?
Well, basically, this was a compromise between the conservatives and social democrats, also a couple of liberals, but mostly social democrats, where the conservatives still wanted to have the old constitution, basically, where you had sort of still a lot of formal power for the king, but basically a lot of social democrats wanted to get rid of the monarchy altogether, and so they made this compromise where we'll still have a monarchy, but it will be basically purely ceremonial. So it's one of those haggling things in politics where two sides want completely opposite and neither really gets what they want, and so we ended up with the model that we had.
Yeah. If I could say one thing, as we talk, comments are coming in. Seem to be quite some people from Britain. We've even got a self-proclaimed monarchist within our comments. Very welcome there. It's always nice to see that people take the opportunity to get out of the heat and get into this heat, a debate about the abolition of the monarchy. But there's another comment of Tom Briggs. I presume he's British as well, judging by the way he writes. He says, and I find that very interesting, he says that the monarchy is an imperialistic system. Nowadays, I know in the Netherlands, there's been a big debate about, breaking off the old institutions. We have to be more diverse, more broader, more open. As we are talking about a monarchy light, that doesn't, it doesn't really fit. And I'm very surprised that in the Netherlands, this whole movement, this whole social awareness, doesn't point out to our monarchy. How does? And I think for the British even worse, as the British and the colonialist empire, that was carried by the monarchy. Is my question clear, or was it too much Dutch in between?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of answering Tom's question, I think it is an imperialist concept by definition. I mean, it's all about, you go right back to Charlemagne, for example, it's all about extending your domain. And with Charlemagne, it was as much about spreading Christianity as, is often argued in the more recent empires, spreading civilization. And, it's just an excuse to grab power and land, and the monarchy gives it a weird artificial sense of legitimacy, as if this divine power is there and they're on a divine mission. So it's all wrapped up in the same thing. It's very much part of that imperial.
But Graham, why isn't there? Well, as far as I know, and as I've seen about Great Britain, and as for here in the Netherlands, why isn't this new movement of more equality? Why doesn't that focus on the Queen? Why doesn't that focus on the whole monarchist institution in Great Britain?
Well, I mean, if you talk about the very recent protests and so on, I mean, that was loud, and a lot of the issues were more about the immediate experiences of Black and Asian people, and I think that it's kind of a stage a bit further down where you start to address the bigger constitutional issues. Most people don't think of the royals as being part of that bigger sort of political, cultural debate, and that's something we did raise it. We said that if you're going to start taking down statues of people who were owning and trading in slaves, then you've got to look at all the monarchs of Britain prior to Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria has obviously reigned over the huge expansion of the British Empire and supported all that and all the rest of it. But it was her immediate predecessors, the King William immediately before her, who was actively involved in funding and investing in the slave trade, and his immediate predecessors to the four Georges, and way back to Elizabeth I. So but we don't get taught that. It's not the way it's seen. It's a big job to sort of connect that to those issues. And I think there's a danger of looking like you're jumping on a bandwagon for your own cause when there are more media concerns about contemporary issues. But I think there was certainly an element of that in the wider public, that people were thinking, well, all of these stuffy old figures that you see statues of around the UK, they're all part of the same problem. But that will come with time.
Talking about that, we've had that in the Netherlands for a very short while. There was a short protest against one of our national figures, Black Pete. It's a fairy tale figure. Now that's very much accepted. That's very outdated, and it doesn't fit to the Netherlands nowadays. That movement for a very short while focused on our king as well. And one of the protesters had a sign saying "Fuck the king," and that basically was the end of that. He was arrested, and they didn't really get into that whole role of the monarchy in slave trade and in the colonialist empire.
He was arrested for that. He was arrested for that slogan.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. That's relevant. Can I again comment, because as I'm following all the comments at the side, I see a lot of people coming in and expressing their sympathy for the Republican cause, or one or two for the monarchist cause. Everybody's welcome, obviously, in this debate. But if you have a question for either Ola, me, or Graham, please put that out, as we will be on live for a couple of more minutes. But I think it would be very interesting if we could answer some of the questions.
Can I just say, speaking of that, there was one question. Well, it wasn't a question as much a statement, but it was Diane Vine, and she said, "Abolition, why call yourselves Republic if you simply want to slim down the parasites?" And the comment there is that we want to abolish it, as we stated, but the discussion is more or less, can it be done through slimming down in stages, or basically the chipping away, or should it just be abolished wholly? And here it lies in like the fundamental question of whether or not there's a trap there if we slim down to the point where people don't care.
But also, I mean, I certainly get the question quite reasonably regularly. Would you accept a compromise where all of the constitutional reforms are made, where there's no constitutional power at all with the monarchy, where the monarch is purely a figurehead, head of state, make it very affordable and all that kind of thing? Would that be streamed, cut down enough? Would that be acceptable? And my answer is always no, because that is still a monarch. It's still someone who is inheriting that position, and whether it's symbolic or constitutional or whatever, that shouldn't happen. The other thing is, if you're going to strip it down to that much, what's the point? Why don't you just let them go and do their own job somewhere else? It's just utterly pointless stripping it down. We need a head of state who has a real function, and who is accountable, chosen by Parliament or people, and it's going to play a serious role. So the idea that there's some kind of compromise, and that ultimately it's a binary black and white issue. We either have a monarchy or we don't, and we don't want one. And until it's gone, we're going to carry on. So it's fairly straightforward. There's a few comments really, and we do see this from people on our own side saying, people are brainwashed, people are they're all believing that the Queen is divine. I don't believe this. In fact, polling doesn't really support it. Most people in this country don't care that much about the monarchy either way, and so our job is now to get people to think more critically of it. People are, I don't think, buy into the divine stuff. I mean, obviously there is a small hardcore that really love it, and one of them, I think, is on our comment section telling us repeatedly that the monarchy is the only true form of government. But I mean, that's a rare position to believe that. I think most people either support it for fairly trivial reasons, or they think it's good as a constitutional monarchy, and they certainly wouldn't support any movement the other way towards a stronger monarchy, or they just don't care and they think, well, let it run on, doesn't matter, So, but I don't think I think the idea that people are brainwashed, I just don't think people care that much, you know.
No, it's the same. I don't think people care.
As I now see that the comment of Jim Monroe is being put up, obviously over the last couple of months, or weeks, as we have had these debates, this has been coming up a lot. How can you make republicanism more attractive to broader people? As obviously lots going on in society, and do people care? And I must say that if I can just comment from the Netherlands on this, is that obviously you can make democracy as a vague and non-touchable subject if you want. But I think nowadays more and more people, especially the young, have a very strong belief in democracy, in freedom, in press freedom. And for them, that subject is not that vague. So yes, I do see, and all the polls in the Netherlands show a stronger favor of younger people for republicanism, and you can make it as touchable as you want to. So no, I don't think it's a vague subject, and I think in the long run, as younger people are not as connected to the whole tradition and the fairy tale as probably older generations are, it's got to be a very actual theme.
And one of the things I've said is that small r republicanism is growing. So I think in this country, people feel much more like they're citizens with rights, that they are in charge of the country, that these elites at the top shouldn't be doing whatever they want without us having a say and so on. So I think that kind of, and that comes through in different ways. So I think there's an element of that even in Brexit. There's an element of that in a lot of the protests more recently. That people don't want to just be governed by the people in London or wherever, and they want to feel like they're much more connected. And also, even certainly in the UK, devolution and other changes in the system have, I think, made that sense much stronger. I was going to pick up this monarchist God Save the Queen is the commenter, can't spell monarchist, mind, but has asked a couple of times about what happens to the Church of England. Is the church established in? It was established in Sweden, was it? And they disestablished it, or am I thinking of Norway?
Yeah, it was separated officially at the beginning of the century. So basically, 2000, they officially separated state and church, but they were tied until then. But it's now not tied to government. Officially, there's some ties left in sort of that hasn't been severed. For instance, like we still pay a funeral fee. Like general, regardless of whether or not you're part of the church, but mostly 99% severed, basically.
Yeah. Certainly for us, our church is very much part of the establishment, the Church of England. We have 25 bishops of the Church of England in our Parliament, in the Lords, which is pretty outrageous. We are one of two countries that have state clerics in our Parliament, the other one being Iran, and the Queen is the head of church as well as head of state. They're absolutely bound together. So I think that needs to be separated. And this is one of the reforms which may happen as we go along the route. If we start to see a shift in opinion and attitude towards getting rid of the monarchy, it may be that they start saying, well, one of the things we can do is separate church and state. Does that make it any better? We'll go, well, slightly, but we need more. And you might say, well, let's get rid of the House of Lords. Is that any better? It's like, yes, of course, but we want more. We keep on coming back until we have what we want. So, but I think that the Lords, the Church, and the monarchy are absolutely bound together. And we have, I'll try and keep this short. We have a lot of Church of England people in our membership who think that the Church of England should be separated. So it's not an anti-church thing. We have no problem with the church, but the church should not be part of the state. Everyone's religions or lack of religion should be of equal status.
Yeah, and can I just interject quickly there? Sorry, Floyd, I'll let you. But that's also one of the things with the monarchy that's still like the only public institution where we have a religious test still, because the king, well, the monarch, the king or the queen, has to be of a very specific Protestant faith. So whilst the separation of church and state has been done, this is still something that needs to be for the monarchy.
So the Swedish monarch still has to be what, Lutheran?
Yeah, specific Habsburg Lutheran, basically. Right. It's stated in the constitution which Protestant.
Flores.
Yeah, didn't want to react on this more religious background and the connection between religion and the monarchy, as there is a connection in Holland as well. But on one of the reactions of Jeff Allibone, and he's really getting into the bicycle monarchy idea of they're really great in business, so let's get rid of all the archaic episodes, and let's get rid of all the but let's use them for what they're good in. And I would like to reply to that. Thing is, and we keep on repeating that in this debate, there is no such thing as a monarchy light or a democracy light, or whatever taste you go for. There is democracy and just democracy, and any other form is not democracy. So a democracy with a monarchy intertwined still is not a real democracy. Yeah. Apart from that, and we've been debating this over the last couple of weeks a lot. The idea that this royal family, because they are royal and because they've been brought up within a certain idea, are really good for business. That these people have business in their DNA, so we need them. I think that idea is preposterous. I don't think that you can defend that idea that certain people, because they belong to a certain family, are better in business, and so they will be better in representing our companies. Doesn't make any sense. And because let me get into this a little bit more. You know, as England and Sweden and Holland, our monarchs go out on these international travels, and they represent the country, and people keep on saying, you know, they do a really great job. Do you really think that the biggest banks, the biggest entrepreneurs, our partners during these meetings are influenced by the fact that they're talking to a king or a queen?
No, it's not. I mean, people say things like this with us. I mean, there's a report out from some other companies saying that we benefit from the royals because they go on international trade delegations. I mean, it makes absolutely no difference. There was another point from E. Zanderman about dukes, barons, lords, etc., which I want to pick up. Because I'd like to hear what the situation is in Netherlands and Sweden as well. But just very quickly, you said before, Ollie, about the monarch needing to be Habsburg Lutheran. We don't say what our monarch has to be. We say what our monarch cannot be, which is Catholic. So our legislation, which was actually reformed in 2011, so it's very recent legislation, is specifically anti-Catholic, which is absolutely outrageous. This bit about dukes, barons, lords. I mean, we have a whole network of dukes, barons, and lords. There's all sorts of people with daft titles, not just the royal dukes, such as William and Harry, but the Duke of Westminster, the Duke of Bedford, Duke of Northumberland. A lot of them are large landowners. A lot of them no longer are, but still have these daft titles, and obviously quite a few of them end up in our House of Lords. I mean, we would certainly want to get rid of all that. I think that I was just reading the US Constitution, as I do, because I'm a complete geek. And there's a line in it about, Congress will never grant nobility or title to anybody, I think that should be the case here. No one should be elevated in status. If you've got a job that gives you status, fine, you've got that job, and for as long as you've got it, good luck to you. But you shouldn't be given a title that allows you to go around saying, look at me, I'm a lord or whatever. So, I mean, do you have? I know that there are sort of historic titles, but do you have that kind of thing in Sweden and Netherlands?
We do have a aristocracy. We don't grant. Well, the sort of monarchy doesn't grant any titles anymore. You can't actually be named a duke or baron or whatever. Like, that's all a legacy system, and it's wrapped up within itself. They have their own little club, but we do not have nobility in that way, and you can't really, in at all, actually be named a sir or a madam or whatever. So we do not have that anymore. For legacy purposes, they have their own thing, and they have their own rules and whatnot. We do not have that in public life as you do in the UK.
Does it have a legal foundation? I mean, are there laws in Sweden that say that these
yes,
are...
you have some legal precedent. The only one I can think of right now is that to register a coat of arms in Sweden, you cannot use an open helmet in it. That's reserved for aristocracy. I mean, you can use it, whatever, but if you want to like trademark it, you cannot use an open helmet in your coat of arms. That's reserved for people that are within the aristocracy. That's the only one I can think of right now. There might be some, but as I said, it's largely done away with. It really isn't.
But if you decided to call yourself Lord Ollie Nicholas, then
I mean, I would not be recognized by that organization, but it would mean absolutely nothing. Basically, we don't grant titles of nobility anymore.
Yeah, that's really interesting. But
it's the same in the Netherlands, basically. We have quite a lot of people with still family names and call themselves whatever, but it's mostly very historic. The interesting thing is that the majority of our nobility is far older than our monarchy. So still the people with any title all derive from far beyond that. We had a new title which our King William I came up with in the 1815s. Everybody who supported him got the title of Jonkheer. But I believe that from ever in the 1830s, they did not have any practical power. Obviously, as these people were more wealthy, as these people were titles, were part of the old boys network, they had a little bit more influence, but it's not regulated by law, and it's not the case like it still is in Britain, and it's not given out anymore either.
No, I mean, I should say that it's very rare that we give out hereditary titles anymore.
Yeah,
I think I'm right in saying that Margaret Thatcher was given one, which then went to her son when she died. That might even be the last one. I don't know, but the ones that still exist, and there are plenty of them, are still inherited. Personally, if we become a republic, I would very much like to see a law passed that said that that converted all hereditary peerages into life peerages, so that when the current generation die out, then there are no more left. I mean, I did a debate in Oxford Union with a count and a viscount, and it was slightly ludicrous, and they were very pompous and silly people. And I did say that, I thought counts were the sort of character you find in Sesame Street, not wandering around the halls of power in London, but it's just slightly ridiculous and pompous, and they worry about it like this, having a badge with an open helmet. I mean, if that's what they worry about, then they probably need to get out more. I find the whole thing incredibly silly and childish, but they do also have a lot of land and if you've got land, you've got power. You've got wealth, you've got power. So I think there are other issues there tied up with the old aristocracy. One of them did tell me that one of them said ours is one of the oldest families in Britain, and I thought, well, if you have any understanding of evolution, that we're all as old as each other. So it's all a bit daft, but it's just another way of exercising power.
As we are already debating approximately 40 minutes, and I presume that people will eventually want to do a little bit more in their evening, I think we're going to wrap up. I must find it very interesting, and I find it very interesting that in our debate, in our comment section, we have people from all over Europe, we've people from Holland, and their arguments seem to, whether they are in favor or they're very against the monarchy, their arguments seem to be the same. And we've seen that over the last couple of weeks. I find that very interesting. One thing to come to a common ground, another interesting thing, and that was while Graham's connection was lost, we had this digital Brexit for a second. But is that we all the Republican movements, whether it's in the Netherlands or in Sweden or in England, we all say that rather not a monarchy light, but just abolition of the monarchy as a whole. So I find that very interesting.
And as one of the comments earlier, we can't call ourselves Republican campaigns if we're going to accept a compromise. Other people can compromise or ask us to compromise, but our job is to get rid of the monarchy, and that's as black and white as it can be said.
Next time, we will debate the different kinds of republic, the models in Ireland, in Germany, in Switzerland. And again, I would really like to see so many comments as we debate, as this ought not to be just a debate between the people that are in the Republican movements and are to be seen in screen. So that's it from the Netherlands, from Amsterdam. Graham,
Yep.
nice to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Ola.
Thank you.
Until
Thank
next
you, guys.
time.